Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Hidden Histories, the Untold Files. You know, sometimes the most profound mysteries aren't found in lost cities or grand tombs, but in the quiet corners of museum storage. A few years ago, during a visit to the National Museum of Iraq, I saw something that stuck with me ever since. It was a small, unassuming clay jar, about the size of a fist, with a copper cylinder and an iron rod inside. It looked functional, deliberate, and according to the label, it was over 2,000 years old. They call it the Baghdad Battery, and the question it asks is as simple as it is shocking. Did ancient Parthian craftsmen harness electricity centuries before Galvani or Volta were even born? That's what we're investigating today. The claim is extraordinary. A working electrochemical cell from roughly 200 BCE to 200 CE. If true, it rewrites a chapter in the history of technology. But is it true? Or is this a classic case of a modern idea being projected onto an ancient artifact, creating a myth we desperately want to believe? Let's unpack this mystery layer by layer. The story begins in 1936, in the village of Khujut Rabu, just outside Baghdad. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig was excavating a Parthian-era site when he discovered, or perhaps later identified from existing museum collections, the records are a bit fuzzy, these peculiar jars. Each one was a sealed clay vessel containing a rolled copper sheet, housing a single iron rod. The iron rod was isolated from the copper by an asphalt plug at the top, which also sealed the contents inside. Crucially, the iron rod showed signs of acidic corrosion. Koenig, looking at this assembly, had a eureka moment. It looked, for all the world, like a primitive galvanic cell. Fill the jar with an acidic electrolyte, like vinegar or grape juice, and the difference in potential between the copper and the iron in that acidic solution could produce a small electrical charge. A voltage, ancient electricity. Now, on the surface, the evidence seems compelling. The components are all there, two dissimilar metals, an electrolyte, and an insulating separator. Experiments with replicas have shown that yes, you can get a low voltage current, around 1 to 2 volts, from such a setup. Proponents of the battery theory often ask, what else could it have been? And they point to other ancient mysteries, like the inexplicably fine gold plating on some artifacts from the same period, suggesting electroplating. Or they whisper about ancient Egyptian reliefs in the Dendera temple that some interpret as depicting giant light bulbs. The idea is seductive, a forgotten thread of scientific knowledge lost to time. But here's where we, as investigators, have to apply some rigorous skepticism. The first and biggest problem is context. Not a single one of these so-called batteries was found with any attached wires, conductors, or devices that could use electricity. No electrodes, no lamps, no evidence of a circuit. In archaeology, context is king. If you find a vase, you expect to find pottery nearby. If you find a tool, you look for the workshop. Finding a standalone object that could be a battery, without any of the supporting infrastructure that a technology requires, is a major red flag. It's like someone 2,000 years from now finding a single, isolated car battery in a field and concluding our entire civilization was powered by them, without ever finding a car. The second issue is the complete and utter silence in the historical record. The ancient world, particularly the Hellenistic and Parthian cultures from this period, were meticulous record keepers. They wrote about philosophy, medicine, engineering, and alchemy. Something as revolutionary as the controlled production of electricity, even as a curiosity, would have been noted, described, or mythologized. But there is nothing, not a single text, not a hint, not a legend that can be reliably connected to electrical experimentation. So if it wasn't a battery, what was it? Well, the most accepted archaeological explanation is far more mundane, but in its own way, just as interesting. It was likely a storage vessel for sacred scrolls. The Parthians and later the Sasanians often used sealed clay jars to protect important religious or ritual texts, written on parchment or papyrus. The iron rod would have been the scroll's spindle, the copper cylinder its protective case, and the asphalt plug was there to hermetically seal the contents from moisture and decay. The acidic corrosion on the iron? That could simply be from organic acids produced by the decaying parchment itself over centuries. This explanation fits the archaeological context perfectly. We found scrolls stored exactly this way in other cultures. It's practical, it's documented, and it requires no leap into speculative technology. I have to tell you, as an engineer, I find both explanations fascinating, but for very different reasons. The battery theory appeals to the part of me that loves revolutionary ideas, the possibility of hidden genius. But the scroll storage theory appeals to my respect for elegant, simple solutions. It's a reminder that we often look for complexity where there is none. We want the past to be more technologically advanced than it was, because it makes for a better story. It connects us to them in a way that feels like progress was a shared secret. But maybe the real connection is more human. They weren't trying to make a battery. They were trying to preserve words, ideas, faith. They were fighting time, just like we are. In the end, the Baghdad Battery remains a powerful symbol. It's a Rorschach test for how we view the past. Do we see ancient people as fundamentally like us, capable of flashes of our modernity? Or do we see them as different, solving their unique problems with the tools and intellect of their own time? The artifact itself is silent on the matter. It sits in that museum case, holding its secret. Perhaps its true purpose is neither to power a light nor to protect a scroll, but to power our imagination and to protect us from the arrogance of assuming we know all there is to know about history. The takeaway for me, Ibnul, isn't a definitive answer. It's a lesson in humility. History is not a puzzle with one missing piece we just have to find. It's a vast, fragmented mosaic, and sometimes a piece can fit into two different pictures. Our job is to weigh the evidence, listen to the context, and resist the easy allure of the sensational. The truth is often quieter, but no less profound. Thank you for joining me for this investigation into the untold files. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please do share the episode with a fellow history-curious friend. For more mysteries, explored with care and curiosity, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Hidden Histories, produced by Light Knot Studios. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, keep questioning.